The Authors Forum exists to inspire success. We will talk with authors and others in the publishing industry to bring you essentials and advice. Dr. Veronica Esagui is your host for Authors Forum.
Welcome to the Authors Forum. I'm your host, Dr. Veronica Esagui, chiropractic physician in Westland, Oregon, and the author of the Scoliosis Self-Help Resource Book and Veronica's Diary sequels, The Journey of Innocence, Braving a New World, and Awakening the Woman Within. My guest today is listed in Who's Who of American Women. That is Marleigh Kline. She's also an online radio host of Streetwise Spirituality on Contact Talk Radio Fridays at 6 p.m. Pacific. She is a workshop facilitator, speaker, and journalist, and she is the author of Streetwise Spirituality, 28 Days to Inner Fitness and Everyday Enlightenment. Carol, welcome to the Authors Forum.
Thank you so much, Veronica.
You're welcome. Your book is Streetwise Spirituality, 28 Days to Inner Fitness and Everyday Enlightenment. How did you come to write it?
Well, it began when I was 13 years old. I was going to a metaphysical church with my mother, and we would go twice a week, and I would gather all these lecture transcripts from those gatherings, and I'd put them in a box. And this went on for years, and I finally just fastened up the box and went about my life and didn't open it up anymore and left the area. And then in 2005, I moved to Portland. And here was this box that had been so beaten up for so many years. And I thought, why am I carrying this around? So, okay, I'm going to throw it in the dumpster. But I thought, one more time I'll take a look. And I slid it open, and I pulled out a transcript, and I was reading it, and I thought, this is really interesting. There are things in this box that if I had known them before, my whole life would have been different.
You've written it?
No, I didn't write those. Those were transcripts from the lectures that were given at the Metaphysical Church for like 35 years.
Wow.
So I just had this huge, huge box of what had been said so long ago. And they were talking about things like the importance of patience and perseverance and adaptability. And I wasn't any good at any of those. I was probably the most impatient person in America, very flighty and rigid. Things had to be the way I wanted them to be, and otherwise I'd get really very upset. And I had all kinds of relationship problems. I would connect with very inappropriate men because I was looking for them to save me, and this was never going to work out. So as I read the transcripts, I began to understand that if I didn't begin from within, if I didn't come from love, come from understanding, it didn't matter what was going on outside, because I would always be seeking and never finding. And that was kind of the story of my life for many, many years.
So that's what happened. That was what the clinch that happened there.
Yes, and so when I was reading the transcripts, I thought, I'm going to try this. And I did, and it began to change my life. I thought, well, if it can change my life so much by just making these little shifts, perhaps it would be of value to other people. And that's when I began writing, and writing, and writing, and writing. And at the end of 3 years, I had a book.
It took you 3 years to put it together.
Yes.
And every time you were writing each page, what was happening? You were learning more and more.
I was learning more. It was very valuable.
So you turned around because within yourself, this is the big change that happened to you when you opened this box.
Yes.
And that's what happened to, well, you hope to happen to everyone that's going to read Streetwise Spirituality.
I would hope, because the fundamental idea behind the book is that spirituality has to be something that we can live. It's not something that you hang on a peg on a door between visits to a church. But something that you live. So of course people who go to churches, they too can do the same thing to pull in what it is that is most deeply spiritual and live it. Because that's when it really makes a difference in our lives, is when we live it, not just hear about it. It's the practice.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of Can you think of another example that would help people to understand what you mean?
Okay. Well, for me, I look at each experience now as a potential spiritual lesson. So if something upsets me, say that I got into, well, I remember back in Washington, D.C., I was having real problems with the fact that I was late getting to work. And the first time I clocked the distance between my home and the office, it was 11 minutes. So I thought, well, that's what it should be. But I'd get into traffic and people would get in my way and I'd be pounding on the wheel and, oh, you're stupid drivers, you're always getting in my way. And I never got to work on time. It was so upsetting. So I thought, well, maybe I should allow a little more time. No, never, This is my time, I am not going to do that. And I fought it and fought it. But finally I tried and got to work on time. And it was so interesting that the shift that happened, before that I had been angry with drivers, but by allowing the time I could let them go ahead of me, it didn't matter. Let pedestrians go ahead of me, it didn't matter. I had internalized a point of peace. What I had to do in order to be peaceful was to allow more time. It seems so simple now. Right. And I blocked it and fought it, resisted it, resented it for years. I think it was at least 2 years that I was doing that. And then, of course, one day after I was doing this, I realized the reason I never got to work on time was that the first time I clocked that commute was on a Sunday. You know, when was it ever going to be only 11 minutes on another day? Yeah. But that never even occurred to me.
So, Carol, how would readers use your book, Streetwise Spirituality?
It's in 2 parts. The first part kind of lays out the basics. It talks about what you need to know in order to understand the precepts that turn up later on in the workbook. And the workbook is, there's a meditation, there's an intention, there's a quotation, there are true life stories, and then there are exercises. And the exercises take the reader back to his or her own life, saying, well, okay, here's the lesson for this particular story. So what did you do in the past with similar circumstances? What do you do now? And what might you do in the future? And so it goes through 28 days because it's like, I think 21 days that you're supposed to be able to change a habit. And I thought, throw in an extra 7. That would be helpful.
Like God.
Yes.
You know, I'm sorry, just a little extra time.
A little extra time, yes.
Yeah. So what's the core of Streetwise Spirituality?
The core of it is that we are in Earth School. I really believe that we are here, it's not just happenstance. We are here to learn lessons, to grow, to evolve, and that especially with the lessons that bother us most, I believe in reincarnation too. And so it's like you come back and back and back and back until you finally learn them. And then you go on to some other dimension and do good things there.
You learn plenty.
Oh yes, and it takes us a long time because we put these things off.
Yeah.
And we want to have fun, and we're told in our culture that like you're going to really be happy if you get just the right career or if you get just the right partner. So we chase after them, and things fall apart, and we keep chasing. We don't realize we're chasing in the wrong direction instead of turning back and starting from who we are, from our deepest selves, from our innermost selves.
Why do you call it Streetwise Spirituality?
It's streetwise because it should be able to be used no matter what. You know, you're out on the street and a car drives past and splashes you all over with water. And that can be a very irritating thing. And the automatic reaction is to get really full of rage and blame and say, oh, terrible guy. But if you think about it a little bit more deeply, think, well, it's raining. And there's a lot of water down there. If I had stood like a couple of feet back, it wouldn't have mattered this person was driving through because he's paying attention to himself. Mm-hmm. I need to take care of myself. And to me, everything is spiritual. There's nothing in life that doesn't have a spiritual connection. So therefore, that kind of experience is spiritual if we learn from it, if we grow from it, and if we carry forth into our lives the things that we learn in these simple things, that, you know, the things that irritate us. Because emotions are just, I find them so exciting. They are absolute guideposts to spirituality. You can follow them right straight to home and say, ah, that's what it's all about. And we can change. I love that we can change the neural pathways in our brains.
The retraining.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. What's the lesson behind abandonment?
Well, abandonment is something that many, many people go through. And it can be kind of the song of your life. It became the song of my life. My father abandoned me when I was 5. And so from that point forward, I thought of myself as Carol, the fatherless child. So I would go and I would connect, when I was dating, I would connect with men who would abandon me, or I would abandon them. And this just went over and over. It was this constant loop. There was this deep spiritual lesson to that I was not seeing, because I was just angry with these guys for leaving me, or bored with them and I'd leave. But it was all going on in my head and in my emotions. Until I finally realized the lesson behind abandonment is I should never abandon myself. That one, when I first realized that, it just gave me goosebumps. Mm-hmm. It was so exciting. And I thought, well, how have I abandoned myself? I've done it physically, mentally, I've done it spiritually, emotionally. The physical side, I had eaten all kinds of terrible food all of my life, many of us do. And I had gotten by with too little sleep and too much work, just driving. The mental side, I thought of myself as a loser. And the spiritual side, I just ignored completely. I didn't see any connection between what I was going through and some kind of a spiritual lesson there. And emotionally, I was always hooking up with the wrong guy. Mm-hmm. It was constant. It didn't matter what decade of my life it was the wrong guy. And only after I realized that I should not abandon myself could I begin to work on that. And to me, that was at the spiritual heart of abandonment. And every one of these, like if we have an issue of rejection, any of these deep, deep things that move us in a very negative sense, there is a spiritual lesson at the heart of it, and we are meant to learn it. And if we do, we can change our lives.
Yeah, once we understand it, that is what your book teaches.
Yes.
Which is an incredibly experience to read your book. I really, really enjoyed it, and I can see a lot of people benefiting from it. It sounds like you were run by fear also.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people do that when they have the abandonment. That comes to fear, running away by fear.
Right. I had no idea what love was, really. Mm. I thought it was finding somebody to make me happy, and it wasn't.
Right.
But fear drives us until we realize that it's driving us. It's only after we realize it that we can make a change. And you just see it everywhere. People are afraid there's not going to be enough love for me, there's not going to be enough money for me, there's not enough security for me. And so we run and we compete. We fight so hard to try to fill our little bucket, and there's a hole in it.
Yeah, it's the me song.
It is. It's the me song, and it's looking again to the outside instead of recognizing that we have everything inside.
With your Streetwise Spirituality, you talk about outer mind and soul mind. What are they?
Outer mind and soul mind I find to be a really easy way to get a handle on what it is we're experiencing in life. And like outer mind is like ego, it's kind of the negative experiences, and soul mind is soul, and it's the positive experiences.